Okay, good evening, everybody. Can we quiet down, please? Good evening. We up? Good evening, everybody. It's time to start. Could I ask everybody to settle down? Thank you. And welcome to the February meeting of the Town of Philipstown Conservation Board. What I'd like to start with is approving the minutes. And I'd like to start with, we have 3 months to do, November, December, and January. Has everybody reviewed November? Rob, you were not there.
For November? I thought it was not December.
I don't know, that's the minutes say you weren't there, but perhaps you were. So, do I have a motion to accept the minutes?
I'll make that motion.
And second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, December's minutes.
Motion to approve December.
Okay.
Second.
Second, all,
Second over there.
okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And last but not least, January's minutes.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve? All approved? Okay, thank you. That's easy enough. Okay, let's go to old business, Timber Ridge, 346 Indian Brook Road, please. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. We were here 2 months ago, and we had discussion with the board. The wetlands inspector visited the site, and we made a few changes to the plan, including expanding the wetland crossing, the bridge, and also preparing an overall plan. So we believe we've addressed all of the comments from the board, and we were looking for the administration of the wetlands permit for both the upper and the lower building.
Max, because you were out there the last time, most of us were at a site visit.
After the meeting 2 months ago, I think the only remaining items are what you just covered in regards to clarifying the span of the bridge crossing, or the wetland crossing there, and then also having both of your wetland permit plans on one overall master plan, which I believe they satisfied at this point. So I would advise the board to vote or for a conditional permit if there are any additional conditions that the board would want to see set forth on the applicant.
Why don't you just quickly explain to the board, Max was there and discussed it with me, how you're doing the crossing, the bridge,
Sure.
right? That's
So-
worthwhile, explain it.
On the property, there is a minor intermittent drainage channel that comes down the hillside. It's basically a bleed out from the embankment. And we are proposing a driveway that is going to cross the intermittent drainage channel. So what we've done is, based upon the site inspection with the wetland inspector, we've created a span of 26 feet clear in order to allow there to be no impact from the construction of the bridge within the confines of the intermittent drainage channel. And that's reflected on the plan here, and I believe that's more than adequate to preserve the crossing.
And are we using a precast, or are we using beams?
Well, we had considered a precast finished bottomless culvert, but due to the span, now we are investigating the possibility of simply building a beam bridge crossing structure. So it hasn't been determined. That will be finalized prior to application for a building permit.
Preference next, or?
I think
Not really.
when I spoke with the homeowner, I think the least impact and the most conducive to keeping the site look naturalized would be to do the span beams. I think it'll look like almost like an elevated surface above, a naturalized area, and you'll get more light and water flow and wildlife movement potentially, even in its limited capacity with that design. So I think everybody was happy with that and happy with the distance when we went out there, so.
And it appears that may be the more efficient way to go about it. That's what we're getting the final details on.
Do you have other comments or questions? I mean, I would suggest, yeah, my suggestion would be to provide a conditional permit.
Do you want to, for the record, just express the conditions before we vote?
I think it would be, the main thing would be the span bridge there. We had talked about any sort of mitigation work, 2 months ago, but I don't think the board deemed it necessary at that time. It was just solidifying the design of that crossing to meet and come to a compromise that everyone was comfortable with. So,
We had included a stormwater infiltration trench along the driveway to collect any potential runoff.
And I believe just using a span like this, that's that wide, that's allowing the natural sheet flow to exist, is a mitigation in its own sense. And I think at this point, I think the small details, unless something comes up, I think can be managed by Max. We all comfortable with that?
Yes.
Okay, so with that said,
so we'll vote on 2 permits,
yep,
one for each phase
Yep.
of the project. Okay.
so in regards to, which I believe is number 2, is the bridge, let's do that. We'll do it backwards tonight. Do I have a motion to approve a conditional permit?
Make that motion.
And a second?
Oh, no, go ahead. No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and we'll go for number 1, which is the the small work that's being done around the house. And I guess that also includes abandonment of the existing septic field and whether trenching will be necessary for the septic and power lines. So do I have a motion for a conditional permit for that?
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
And a second?
So moved? Oh,
Okay. All in favor?
aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Time, good evening.
Thank you. And keep in touch with Max, please, on this. Okay, let's go to Rosemary Corbett, trustee, 548 East Mountain Road North.
Good evening. Jason Snyder with Beatty and Watson, representing the applicant, Rosemary Corbett. So we have a proposed lot line adjustment in front of the planning board. They made the referral to the conservation board based on there being some wetlands on site. I just wanted to clarify that there's no proposed site development, site work associated with this lot line adjustment. It's strictly to make one lot larger and make the 2 lots more equal. So I believe there was some discussion about simply putting a note on the plan indicating that when the time comes for a building permit to be issued and if and when there is any proposed plan of development for either lot, although one has a house on it, that they'll have to do the DEC wetland validation and go through all the proper review as if it were a.
So sort of the behind the scenes, I don't want to use it as compromise, but this was referred to us by the planning board, particularly because the town engineer thought we needed to do due diligence of whether there was going to be an issue with wetlands and perhaps steep slopes. We were asking for the septic and one margin of the wetland to be marked, which is an expense, and the weather has not cooperated with us. And I think that the best solution, I think actually Max came up with it, was to make an addendum on the plans that, if this lot is sold and/or planned to be built on, that we need to do delineations.
And we do have the verbiage from another project, so
Right.
we'll use the
So
similar.
I think that is fair, and, when is the next planning board meeting so that we can get a memo out?
Next Thursday.
So do you think you could get that to Max and I to look at?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah, and if you
tomorrow.
could get that, if you
Yeah.
can get that tomorrow, then the
Yeah.
2 of us will get a memo out to the planning board, and we'll
Certainly.
CC you ASAP.
Yeah.
So I have a question about that strategy. How will that be enforced?
Well, we
It's
did
gonna
it,
go-
yeah, we did it on the prior project, that came to us for a similar reason, last year, I think. where we all walked. It was off of Lake Surprise Road, and they ended up putting on the site plan in a big bold red box. There are regulated resources in this area. Prior to development, due diligence must be done. I would say that's going to become the accepted site plan that the planning board is going to agree upon in this lot line adjustment. And so I think the tendency in the past would have been to not include that language, and then people would start work. And then they would say, we have an approved site plan already. So if that approved site plan has that language on it, it's a way maybe that we'll be able to head that off. It's not the perfect solution, but
But that gets recorded in the building
yeah,
department.
yeah,
right?
like they'll
And-
have that
Right.
as their
Yeah.
approved site plan in the files.
And it's a very good question you brought up, or concern. Most likely, how the lot is situated, and most of these lots, it's gonna break the threshold of what the planning board has to look at anyway, between clearing for the septic, for the driveway, and for the house. So it would end up in the planning board's. Yeah,
Okay.
so, everybody comfortable with that? Okay. Then we go to number 3, which is also you, Jason. It's Fergus Chen, 236 Old Albany Post Road. I know that the planning board had scheduled a site visit for last Sunday, but the weather
Right,
didn't
yeah,
cooperate.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to discuss it at all at this point. Ultimately, the Conservation Board is going to need to have a site visit. I'm familiar with the property. Essentially, they're taking a house that's probably about 1,600 square feet, and increasing it to about 7,000 plus, though I don't think that's the footprint. I assume it's several stories high.
Yeah, the footprint is, I believe, just they have like a, for lack of a better term, like a greenhouse off to the side, so that puts it just over the 4,000 square foot footprint mark. In general, the way that there's sort of like a developed area, and it's all cobblestone and decking. So it's not just, it's more than just the 1,600 square feet with the, of the house. It's also the house and the decking and the impervious surfaces that are underneath the decking. So generally, they are developing the footprint of the new house over existing impervious surfaces. So they're actually with this development, they're actually decreasing the amount of impervious surfaces in the building area. And there are wetlands along Old Albany Post Road and a little pond. This was the Montoya, you know, the Montoya. And they're just building in the same footprint, and everything should be outside of the wetlands and off the building should be off the
buffer
steep
for the
slope.
pond.
Yeah,
Right.
right, correct.
I know the existing property encroaches on it's either one or class 1 or 2 steep slopes, but it's already been done. So at this point, I guess the planning board will have a site visit. Perhaps some of us can tag along. If not, we'll want to take a look, but I don't think this is a major.
Has that been rescheduled?
It'll be rescheduled next week.
Okay, okay.
Is this former Montoya?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. So, anybody have any questions? I do think, I have a set of plans, but I do think plans should be distributed to this board
Okay.
for, I don't know if everybody is comfortable with just electronic plans, so we're not wasting extra paper on this one,
I'm okay with that.
right? So maybe let's just
Okay.
distribute it.
Yeah, we'll send the PDF over.
Yeah, I think that might make the most sense.
Okay,
Okay?
okay, very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, a new business, Lehman and Gherty on 155 East Mountain Road North.
Good evening to the board. I want to thank the board for putting us on the docket on short notice. I was very surprised and pleased getting communication from Cheryl end of last week that allowed us to be at this meeting. So thank you for that. And I also wish to express my gratitude to Max, Greg, and Cheryl for their consistent communication with us as we approach this project. So this project is, I'm sorry. The project is an accessory building, and we hope to instill an architectural merit into the structure. And it also is intended to tread lightly on the landscape. It's within 100 feet of the pond on the property, as you're well aware. So the project is thought of as sort of an architectural folly, if you will. Perhaps some of you are familiar with the Fogo Island architectural follies on Newfoundland. This was sort of an inspiration for this project. I brought a couple of photos to give you, and I'll just distribute them, and you can look to get the idea of a sensitive site that has small structures on it. And that was sort of an impetus from the design point of view of the project. Again, the project, we're very sensitive to treading light. The proposed concept raises the building on piers, if you will. No on-the-grid electricity, no plumbing, just basically an accessory structure that the clients would hope to enjoy the landscape with. And the idea for the structure is that it would work with the landscape in terms of it would be sort of dark gray hues. It would work nicely with the green verdant landscape, and it would try to be discreet and have a nice play of light and shadow, and that's sort of where we're coming from the architectural point of view. And again, trying to make it tread as lightly as possible on the landscape.
What is the footprint of the building?
The footprint is with, including the deck, it's 575, I believe, square feet. Actually, it's 275 for the interior space, 156 for the wraparound terrace, if you will.
And the closest it comes to the pond right now is, it looks like it's 32 feet from the map I'm looking at?
No, the other side is a little bit closer, 26.
Okay, yep, I see that. And what's there right now?
It's just grass.
It's grass.
Yes.
Okay, so it's the
It's slightly
disturbed area.
terraced, the landscape. You can see closer to the pond itself, there's a stone wall. We're not interfering with the retaining wall that goes around the pond
So
area.
that already, the stone masonry walk already exists?
That is correct. Everything exists except for the proposed structure itself.
What is the use of the structure going to be?
Well, it's technically an accessory building, but for the clients to just enjoy their pond, to read a book. I can assure you, from my understanding, it is not going to be an Airbnb in any way. It is simply, the client's main property is on the other side of the street. This parcel technically is 156 East Mountain Road North. The clients live at 155 on the opposite side of East Mountain Road, so
Is there any bathrooms or anything that are going in there? No septic?
no plumbing whatsoever, none. There may be a battery-operated system. You can imagine at night it would be nice just to have some, perhaps, a landscape lighting, but also the interior of the structure so they can extend the use of it. No other utilities. And we wouldn't be trenching for electrical, it would be a battery system, so again, the least disturbance of the property.
What about heat for the winter? I mean, obviously, they're
I
probably...
think we're thinking of a wood stove, sir, that, but there's no mechanical system. So again, to extend the hours and the seasonal use, a wood stove on the interior of the structure in accordance with the code in terms of its setup.
So I think the I think where we should go from here is a site visit. Because on the whole, we avoid allowing structures within a buffer. But in this case, you know, it looks like we're in an area that's previously disturbed. So I think it's just, we would want to look at it and then figure out with you what are the best mitigation measures.
So you would want me to join you for that walkthrough?
Ideally, it would be
Oh,
better.
of course, then I'll be happy to do so.
Because you're the architect, yes?
the architect, yes.
Okay, so either the architect or a site engineer would be best.
Okay,
To
well,
join us.
yeah, I'm pretty much handling,
That's fine.
because it's a simple project,
Yeah,
it doesn't call for a civil engineer per se, but yes, I'd be more than delighted to walk the site with you.
I mean, usually when we put something and allow something within the buffer, especially 20 feet away from this, we have a real, like, need, like a, you know, like a use need. There's a reason for it. And obviously, enjoying the pond is an important reason. But, you know, I think kind of having your clients think about the rationale for why so close to the pond. Why couldn't it be further back?
Okay.
And,
Well, that's
and,
an
and this
excellent
kind of
question.
balancing of positives and negatives of having it so close like
And
that.
the answers to that are twofold, really. First of all, this is the flattest area of the site before it becomes steeper. Second of all, there's a lot of ledge and rock outcroppings beyond the back of where the structure is proposed. And third is, behind the proposed location of the structure is wooded and forested, if you will. So this proposed location most likely only entails really relocating one small cherry tree, which is 10 to 12 feet high, less than about 6 inches in diameter, I think. So again, it optimizes the view for the client, but also it's the site with the least potential to disturb the ground cover and you know, dealing with rock and ledge and whatnot, and as well as being the more shallow slope. It has some slope, but it's shallow, you know, and I wanted to put the structure on stilts, and of course the steeper it is and the more ridiculous it looks propping up out of the landscape. So ideally wanted it to sit low, and this site offers that opportunity, but again, it's also the easiest site to build on in terms of no rock and no ledge, no steepness, and no trees per se.
How are you gonna get the construction materials in there?
Yeah, it's a good question. So it's, you know, of course, first of all, in terms of the piers, there's, I think, 12 proposed sonotube piers, if you will, that the structure would sit on. So they would be dug by hand, okay? I know it's important not to bring in a lot of machinery and tear up the landscape. And then when it comes to materials, you know, there's a certain kind of prefabricated mode to this, in that you put the piers in, proposing to use LVL beams, which are these laminated wood beams for exterior grade. So that all can get set very quickly, carried down to the site. Then you have a platform, which is the platform of the house itself, where you can store all the materials. It would be a wood stick structure, nothing terribly complicated. So the thought is, to the extent possible, the platform for the structure itself would be where a lot of that material is stored. It's a small structure, it's only 1 story. And to mitigate, to the extent possible, you know, power machinery or equipment that's on the site. There is no dredging, there is no channeling of the site itself, because there's no plumbing or electrical. So I think we can do a good job of treading lightly in terms of bringing material down, storing material, and the construction.
Everything's gonna be carried in by hand? You're not gonna be driving equipment right up to that?
Well, what do you mean by equipment? I mean, they're gonna have their generators, they're gonna have their...
No, I mean, like truckloads of materials coming in.
You can't drive, no, they're not gonna, they're gonna be carried down.
Okay, well, we'll see when we go up there for the site.
Yeah,
visit.
because the access to the site, it's a shallow sloping site if you walk around the long end of the pond. If you came down directly from the house to the proposed structure, it's a steep steep incline. That's not the way to do it. It'd be too long, too disturbing of the land, if you will, to drive from East Mountain Road where it's a shallow pitch down to the proposed structure. So again, it's a small structure. It'll be a little bit of inconvenience to carry, but it's going to be a wood stick frame structure. You know, the only heavy items really would be the LVL beams and the fenestration pieces and perhaps the metal roofing, but that, you know, is easy enough to bring down in pieces, so to speak. So,
How do
but
they plan on getting there from, like, for, you know, periodic use? Is there gonna be a pathway there, or is there an existing pathway to that site, or they're gonna take the long way?
they're going to take the long way,
Okay, I'm
yes,
just-
because again, that's the safest route, particularly in inclement weather, and the least wear on the site. I mean, it's for Arthur and his wife, and they have a son who does not live up here, so it's not going to be a you know, overly used or party space, if you will. It's just basically for a gentleman and his wife.
I think a few of the things we should think about is perhaps there's an opportunity in terms of mitigation for some improvement of the pond or the shoreline. In return.
I do mention that, you know, the geotex fabric fencing that would go around
I'm
the
not
site.
talking about during construction. Normally, if we're gonna do an encroachment within a buffer area, we usually want some form of, you know, reasonable give back, some improvement of the site. When I say improvement, natural habitat improvement. And I think, I'm not familiar with this particular pond, I'm sure I've passed it, but, you know, we'd wanna look at that. Perhaps something could be done for that.
It's actually quite beautiful in its present state. And,
The other thing I'm wondering, and Max, you know, I'll let you particularly weigh in on this, for a site plan, should we actually have a topo map overlaid so that we can see? In the close-up it is, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the site visit will, you know, really
Answer all that.
elucidate a lot of the questions we have. You know, I mean, I know the project, the structure itself is not that large. I mean, the only other real analogies that I can think of, something similar the board may have considered permitting in the past would be, you know, a shed-like structure, right? And we should think about what we've allowed in the past and what mitigations for a structure like that potentially we've asked for. And I can try to think between now and then some examples that I can
Yeah.
bring to that next meeting that we have.
As well as if we need any management of runoff
Yeah.
from the structure itself.
Yeah.
Sure.
And when we do schedule the site visit, if you can stake the corners of the building, the location of the building prior.
Yes, now, how does snow interfere with your ability to do this?
It's not, it would probably be better to do, you know, an ideal site visit would probably be late March into April at this point.
But we can set a preliminary date
Yeah.
and, you know, reschedule. If the weather's bad enough to push back into those dates, then we can set up a plan A and a plan B.
So in terms of staking the project, would just wooden stakes at the basic four corners of the structure be sufficient for you?
Yeah.
Yeah, the footprint of the building and with the deck.
Right, well, when I say four corners, including the deck itself, so we have the kind of perimeter footprint, if you will. Sure.
As far as mitigations, you know, as part of this project, like Randy was talking about, do the homeowners, are they aware of any kind of deficiencies on the property, like known areas where there's invasives, or there's an old structure that's sitting in the water, or, you know, things?
No, I mean, they're very considerate of the landscape, from my understanding, in terms of plantings and whatnot. They care deeply about the property.
Right.
And it's well maintained.
Right, no, and that's, you know, that's great, but I was just thinking if they knew of something that's, you know, a sore spot that for them, they want to fix, that this might be something that they could propose to fix.
Not
Hey,
to my
let's get rid of
knowledge.
that, you know,
I understand, yes, but I don't believe so, but I can have
Okay,
further conversation. Yes.
All right, so you'll work with Cheryl to plan a site visit.
Be my pleasure. She's been wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming in tonight.
Thank you.
All right, let's have a brief discussion, and Madeline, I'm going to probably let you head it up with Century Aggregates, which is outside of our town in Fishkill, but it could very well have an effect on our aquifer.
So the first Carol and Cheryl asked if she should print something out for this meeting, and I said no, just because. So they have the town of Fishkill has a group that's going through the plan from Century Aggregates, and they came up with about 73 questions, and they will address those questions. And the next meeting is the 13th, is in 2 days. So I thought maybe, I'll watch the meeting and update everybody about what the town has to say about it. They're not making any immediate plans to vote on it or go through it. A couple people have already spoke out at the planning board meetings, and that was in my notes too. So we'll have to see, you could see what the questions that the advisors had, and maybe they'll answer them on Thursday.
So are you planning to either attend, or if it's broadcast, listen to the meeting?
If it's broadcast, I'll listen, but if not, I'll attend.
Excuse me? You'll attend?
Right.
Okay.
But if it's broadcast, I'll watch.
I mean, because I think it could be potentially a concern, so I think what we should then focus on is Madeline will listen or attend the meeting, and at which point, I think we need to figure out, is it a concern that it could be harmful to the aquifer? And then I'll confer with the town supervisor on, what type of communication we might want to provide to the Fishkill Planning Board.
And if there's any clarification in that meeting regarding what stage they're at in the review process, if there's any, benchmark timelines coming up,
Okay.
that would be helpful, I think, so that we don't miss any opportunities of correspondence.
Okay. No public hearing has been scheduled.
Okay. So,
Okay, so we're relatively early in the planning stages, which is good.
Right, it was just referred in December. They had their first meeting about it in January. So this is the second.
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming that they're gonna make a positive declaration on the secret. We'd like to think.
See, we'll see.
We're all smiling on that. Okay. Great. I appreciate you doing that. And I do think it's important for us, we haven't done a lot of this in the past, but to look at what's happening surrounding us, and it's predominantly from the north where we're gonna run into trouble, where it's more development, more congested, flatter terrain. Okay. Let's move on to the last item on the agenda, which is the Hudson Highland Fjord Trail.
And as previously noted in the last meeting, I'm recusing myself from this discussion as I'm an employee of Hudson Highlands Fjord Trail, Inc. So I will leave the days.
So I know it was relatively last minute. Myself, Max, Tony, and Madeline had a meeting with Steve Marino from Tim Miller Associates, who is being hired as the town planner to handle this, as well as Bob Faraday was the liaison from the town board. And we have drafted what I'll call a short executive summary of the thoughts on the project. But I think at this point, easier said than done, but I think it would be nice to have an addendum to that that's putting specific, actual specific details of our concerns. I mean, the great concerns that we have is, and we're focusing predominantly on what is within the town, which is, and the villages, if you will, which is from the tunnels at Breakneck Ridge going south. And we have concerns in terms of both pedestrian and vehicle traffic. I'll call it congestion. We have concerns in terms of wildlife, and particularly what's going to, am I talking loud enough? If not, particularly in regards to the 2.1 mile section of the trail that is a boardwalk in the Hudson. And I mean, we're looking at it as a very attractive amusement that could potentially bring a vast amount of people into the town. The walkway on Hudson and Poughkeepsie, which is less accessible, now has an average visitation of about 600,000 visitors a year. I am not sure that Philipstown or the villages could handle that. And part of our memo speaks specifically to, we are geographically, meaning Philipstown and the villages, are geographically constrained. There are two egresses north and south, being 9D and 9. And both the roads are two-lane roads that are narrow and really not particularly conducive to extra traffic. We only have one egress that comes from the east, and that's 301, and that's even less conducive to the amount of traffic that's there. We're constrained completely by the river and the railroad tracks. There's no egress, from the west. And it's a very, very big concern of ours. So what I'd like for the board to be able to do, and we really need to do this quickly, is by early next week to discuss things that should be added to this memo. And I think it should be done as as I said, an addendum, an index in the back, because we wanted to keep this very easy to read and short. And what exists now is about 2 pages long. And I don't think it should be much longer than that. And I think the different details that we come up with, I think will probably be melded with what Steve Marino from Tim Miller Associates comes up with. He tends to be looking at more of the different details. When I say details, for instance, I think he brought a very good point that we were concerned about the boardwalk, but we weren't really thinking, okay, well, the boardwalk's also going to have a chain link fence on it. And how is that going to affect the view from the village and from what part of it is within Philipstown itself? So do I have any more comments from the board? I would like everybody, I know you just got it in paper. We distributed this electronically. What can be added to it? The draft generic environmental impact statement is gigantic in size. Unfortunately, even the text rendered version is not indexed, so there is no comfortable way to go through the table of contents, particularly because the pages are not, after a certain point, not numbered numerically. So if you go to the Adobe document and you want to see page, S17, well, you're not getting there until you just scroll through it. Max, I think you have also been looking at the appendices that are vast behind it. I mean, we're very concerned about the construction as well. Building a boardwalk that's requiring over 400 piles to be driven in, anywhere from, I believe, 16 to over 100 feet. If that was approved, how is it going to be done from the river, from the shore? And I don't think it can just be done from the river. And the timeline, right now, I believe they're talking for that section would be about 2 years, working 8 hours a day, 5 hours a day. But it seems within the appendices, well, perhaps we would need to work at night as well. I mean, there's a lot of things that need to be looked at.
I got a concern about that, and I haven't seen it in any of the reports. We had a Superfund site down there, just south of there. And Dockside itself, I think, was a gas thing at one time where they made coal tar and stuff like that. Coal tar was part of what came out of it. And the same thing with where the boat club was. They did a remediation down there but they couldn't get it all out. Plus, the PCBs that came from upriver. Now, from what I understand, there's a lot of that stuff is encapsulated in there. And when they were doing the dredging in the Hudson to get rid of the PCBs, they decided after a certain amount of time that you're better off just leaving that stuff there rather than stirring it up. So if they're gonna be putting in all these pylons, that stuff is gonna be stirred up and down, going all over the place. You know, so that's something that might be in there. And also the statement from Riverkeeper, you know, they're pretty on top of things as an environmental organization, and they had a short thing. Now, I don't know if that, now it's getting longer as, you know, as we speak. But those are two of
No,
the,
I mean, it's an interesting point. I didn't even think about that, because yes, a lot of the dredging, you know, it's now, was questioned about a decade ago. Was the dredging that was done of the PCBs done in the best way possible with the technology that existed, because it was shifting material downriver. I was this afternoon looking at the construction documents that are not in the environmental impact statement. They're in the appendices of how the boardwalk would be built, how the pilings would be put in. And while the pilings are not very big in diameter, they're 18 inches, what I was surprised, because I dealt with this years ago at the Garrison Yacht Club, we were driving pilings that would have been probably about 50% bigger in. And we were using a pile driver. They had a permit from the Army Corps of Engineers. Here they're planning in a lot of spots to drill before pushing them in. Because I think because these pilings are made out of hollow steel, I think they're worried about damaging them. So that's very, very fascinating. I mean, Max, you had looked at the section on natural habitat within it, and from what I saw, and I'm not the expert here, I just thought what was done for such a big project, particularly looking at the impacts on the shoreline, was just very cursory. You know, it's just basically, oh, there's very little submerged aquatic vegetation. Doesn't say a lot, though.
When do you want the comments back? A
As soon-
deadline would be good.
As soon as possible. I mean, if it's possible, you know, by the end of the week or over the weekend, because, you know, I'd really like to get a rough draft to the town. You know, I won't even say a rough draft. I'd like to get a draft. I mean, I think with this, you know, we're 3/4 of the way there with whether you want to call it an executive summary or a preamble. But I think more details are needed to back up what we're doing.
So by Monday.
where is Steve Marino on this?
I don't know, but I know his goal, when we sat with him last Wednesday, I believe, was to have something out by the following Wednesday. In other words, 2 weeks.
Yeah, because there was a lot of loose ends
Yeah.
that needed to be,
It's
questions
just,
needed to be
it's a
answered.
tremendous amount of material to go through. It's a tremendous amount of material to go through.
Was it the 17th that he wanted?
Yeah, I think that's what it comes out to. Because I think what we do will end up being merged together. And I think what's really important is to make it very readable. So, and I think that, you know, the advantage we have, there's gonna be a lot of input from the public. But I think that the advantage we have is also that it's coming from the town, and it will be looked at in priority too.
So by Sunday night.
The sooner the better.
Monday morning.
Yeah, I mean, the sooner the better, you know, I think the best way is either bullet points, or if you wanna, mention a particular page within the draft document. Max, do you have any suggestions on methodology? It's not easy.
No, I mean, I feel like the town's perspective is, I mean, Steve is really taking the lead on the overall, you know, comments. He's the professional consultant in terms of that regard. I think the board has a good handle on, you know, the direction based on the memo that you put together that kind of summarizes what his larger document. Yeah, I think, you know, getting his comments and your comments together will make for, you know, a good statement for the public hearing in March.
I mean, our stance right now is we believe that the impact would be one of the biggest developments that's ever happened in Philipstown. And we're sort of comparing it to the building 175 years ago of the Hudson River Railroad, which I assume on the whole the impact was good in the long term for the general public. We're in a different age, and it's something that's a little different. Right now, the amount of visitors that are coming to the Hudson Highland Park Preserve is known is really unmanageable, and I don't think that the Office of Parks, Recreation and Historic Places has really gotten a handle on it. So I think that unfortunately, this is just not going to get better. So with that said, this is not a public hearing, but I am willing to have any comments from the public, but I really would like you to make them short and very focused. Come up and please state your name at the microphone.
I'm Pete Salmonson. A lot of people here know me. I'm an environmental educator. I'm also a volunteer for the New York, New Jersey Trail Conference. And just for purposes of identification, I'm a board member of Friends of Fondstock and the Putnam Highlands Audubon Society. And I submitted some material to the board last week and this week about my personal concerns. The first is about science. The proposal from the DGEIS is to expand the existing Washburn Trailhead parking lot to the south by cutting down approximately 3/4 of an acre of undisturbed woodland. And as some of you know who are bird watchers here, on the east side of the existing parking lot is a bird that's on the list of special concern species in New York State called the cerulean warbler. There's also a pair nesting on the other side of the railroad bridge. And many people come to see those birds because they are not common. And they come here from South and Central America, and then they leave to go back south after the breeding season is over. So one of the concerns of bird watchers in this area is that the destruction of undisturbed habitat and the building of another parking area that would increase the number of spaces to 96 could have a negative effect on the birds that presently nest there or nest there in the summer. So we're concerned about that. Secondly, as the riverkeeper pointed out, and as some of the naturalists in this room know, we also have the eastern fence lizard that is on the New York State threatened list that lives in only 5 locations along the east side of the Hudson River. That's it for the entire state. And if you've seen them, they're really cute. They're very hard to find. There's also skinks, which are not on the threatened list. But the habitat on the west-facing side of Bull Hill and Breakneck and its sorted hills is the habitat for the eastern fence lizard. And to my knowledge, the expansion area, the possible 3/4 of an acre, has not been studied to see if fence lizards live there. So that's part of the science. I just want to briefly mention the people part and the traffic part. As a trail steward, I've seen 2,000 people a day walk up Washburn Trail, and the incredible traffic that exists on 9D with people stopping to see if there's vacancies in the parking lot, people going in and out and backing up, and then there's 25 spaces on the west side of 9D right by the railroad bridge, which to me seems incredibly unsafe. Now, in the proposal, the Fjord Trail is suggesting that they build a roundabout or a traffic circle at the end of the north end of Fair Street where it meets 9D. So that would be 96 spaces of concrete or blacktop, and there would be a brand-new suburban development in the town called the traffic circle at the very end of Fair Street. And for a little town like this, it's almost inconceivable to me that that is something that would preserve the rural nature of Philipstown. And as you know, in the report that Nat Prentice helped put together, the rural nature of Philipstown is our #1 priority here, to protect that and to observe it and to live lightly on the land, as one of the other people here tonight said. So that's my brief remarks. I will say one more thing, that Putnam Highlands Audubon has been studying this for months, and within the next few weeks before March 2nd, we will be coming out with a public statement about our thoughts and science about the proposed Fjord Trail. Board, thank you very much. I appreciate your consideration.
Thank you. I'm going to look that way next, and then we'll go back.
Hi, my name is Robin Moreno. I am a village resident, or I live on Parsonage Street, and I just wanted to, I don't come to the meetings often, but I just wanted to come to give my support to the Fjord Trail. My husband and I and my kids are excited about it. We've been excited for a long time. The kids are getting big, and nothing's been done. They're going to go to college before it ever happens. And I understand the thoughtfulness and absolutely appreciate it, but as someone that's lived here for over 10 years, we all appreciate the nature and the beauty, and we also want to be good stewards. We've been talking about Riverkeeper, and I just happened to look at the comments they made, and some of the comments that they talked about was the emotional health benefits of, the human interaction, of us, being able to actually get to the waterfront, for us to be able to see the birds and have a diverse group of people be able to go and do that. And so I'm just really excited and want to voice my opinion in that. And I guess I'll just say lastly, I know we talk a lot about tourists. I was talking about my kids, that I was going to come here, and I'm a busy mom. I don't always have time to come here, but it's important to us. And she's like, Mom, why do they always talk about the tourists? Why don't they talk about us, like the people, like that we get to ride our bikes and that we're going to get to go down there? And I just want to just sort of put a face to the people that live here. We live in Cold Spring. We're not the tourist, and we're very excited about the possibility about getting to be on the waterfront and getting to get on our bikes that we don't have access to because of the way that we live without a lot of sidewalks, and to get to go to Beacon. And so just as a resident and a mom, I'd like to just express that. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Anita Peltonen. I've never spoken publicly at any of these meetings. I live very close by here on Orchard Street. Anita Peltonen, and I've never spoken publicly. In response to the first two speakers, I would just like to add to the previous speaker's enthusiasm. And in response to the first speaker, environmental concerns are everybody's concerns. I would venture to say that in my experience in almost 30 years of living here, that large dogs create more of a disturbance to wildlife than almost anything that anybody tries to bring up here. If cars are milling around trying to park, running people over, and the traffic is jammed up, it's not good. And while a roundabout is not anybody's idea of a nature landmark, at some point, that very awkward and dangerous intersection needs some kind of remediation. I mean, even without hikers, there are quite often almost accidents at that intersection. So I'm just going to go to the north end of Fair Street, where it joins 9D. Yeah. So I want to express my strong support for the HHFT and for the Overwater Connector. I've, for a very long time, felt passionately that we need this trail along with the connector over the water, and not just for natural enhancement of having a trail in place where access by pedestrians to the riverfront is currently completely blocked. The trail, including the connector, will, number one, give access to handicapped, disabled, younger, much older people, and so on, to our very precious river environment, as well as to the rest of the populace who wants to visit, whether they are residents or visitors. The people who are experts in traffic have to work out the traffic. If people can't park here, they're not going to be cramming themselves onto the trail. They're going to go somewhere else because they're not going to want to walk 2 miles to a trailhead. So we will take what we can take when the planning of the traffic is done. Number two, I have faith that New York State Park will be a wise manager. Why? I lived and worked in the Adirondacks for several years as a tavern keeper. I've personally witnessed New York Park's fantastic stewardship of the wilderness, both on lakesides. I lived on the edge of Lake Champlain, and in the forests and in the mountains. That's just one place among many that I've lived and worked in New York that showed me that smart environmental management is the best route to environmental preservation. Things have to change, but if we can change them wisely and with compassion and consideration, then we all win. Number three, it'll enhance closeness to and love of our precious environmental resources. Those who grow up here and grow old here or move here from elsewhere will all benefit. Number four, we need to have a plan for traffic mitigation in an area that just to date hasn't had any. Every single place in the Northeast and probably the rest of the country is suffering from this. I mean, I will not drive through Connecticut anymore, ever, because I-95 is a parking lot, period. And it wasn't like that when I was a child. I have relatives in Connecticut. So it's a problem everywhere, and Cold Spring needs to deal with it just as does anyone else. And I'd also like to address on the page I have over is the concerns of the disabled. I and my family sincerely hope there might be separate dog areas. Dogs are allowed access to every park and open space in the river counties. My husband and I have walked in places where we've been jumped, where we've walked in dog shit, in places that are supposed to have no dogs allowed.
Can I ask you to focus your comments?
Yeah.
I really need to focus on the draft environmental impact
Okay,
statement.
all right, well, environmental impact, okay. Dogs eat and exude foods and food products that will go into the trail, into the river, and environment-wise, it's not healthy for the dirt, for the water, and extra staff will have to be hired to deal with dog mess. People who are disabled are going to be afraid of being knocked over, or of there being unsafe, having to jump over to unsafe areas to walk if there's too much dog and bicycle traffic. So that kind of remediation is also important. So we need the good that the plan offers. We need the good that the environmental plan suggests, but we can't have anything stay exactly the same, and we can't have anything that's perfect. I mean, I'm turning 65. I've lived here for 30 years. We can have beauty and access soon. I would like to see it in my lifetime, and if we're willing to fight for it, I think that we can all have it. I've been disabled by car and Metro North accidents. I cannot walk in the mountains anymore. I really hope that I will be able to walk on a boardwalk and a trail on the Hudson River in this town that I've spent 3 decades in, as well as my husband, who has a neuromotor disease, who will no longer be able to walk in the mountains and may be in a wheelchair soon. And I'm not trying to sound pitiful. I'm trying to sound sensible and reasonable and inclusive, and I thank you all.
Thank you. Please, let's try to keep it brief, everybody.
Hi, how are you? My name is Edward Corelli. I live at 1 Market Street, and I'd like to first of all say that I am pro-Fjord Trail. I'm an old guy. I've been around for a long time. I've lived in all the boroughs, and I've seen dozens of projects come up, like the East River walkway in Estuary, the walkway of the Highland, walkway of the Hudson, the West Side Highway from Battery Park City all the way up to 200 Dyckman Center. All these projects were initially met with skepticism and discourse. They've all, over time, have risen to their own level of excellence, and we are all the better for it. This project is for New York State. It belongs to all of us. It belongs to everyone. And everyone should have an opportunity to enjoy it. Will there be inconveniences? Absolutely. But nature is resilient. There'll be, say, construction for a number of years, and, we'll all suffer for a short time. But this is a project that's inevitable. It's going to happen whether we like it or not, over time, whether we deal with it now or whether our kids or grandkids deal with it. It's going to happen. And we'll, once it is, we'll be the better for it. So I think that we should accept it, embrace it. It's like all the scuttlebutt about the onslaught of pedestrian traffic. This isn't the only project in town. Cold Spring isn't the grandiose town that we think it is. It's beautiful, we love it, it's quaint, but everyone isn't jumping in cars and buses to come here. There will be people that come up here to enjoy the town, the food, and the quaintness of the town itself, and then there will be hikers. I was at a meeting last week, the DGIS meeting, whatever that is, and and my concerns were Wayfair pathways, traffic, how to control it. That's what's needed. Okay, people get off the trains now, and we're all bothered because they mill around. It's like I live at the corner of Market Street in Maine, right on the south side of the track, and people come around, and I come out of my house sometimes, and I'm telling people, hey, the trails are this way. Go through the tunnel, go down Main Street, and then cut across Fair Street. There's no direction. Once that's established, you'll have hikers getting off the train, going through the park, Dockside Park, finding the trails they need. People who come up here to enjoy the town will go another path. I don't believe for a second that we are going to get an onslaught. When you say there are going to be 600,000 people coming up, and it sounds like a lot. They're not all going to be here at once. They're going to come up in small droves. There are not going to be a bunch of buses, coming up and blocking the streets and the avenues. That isn't going to happen. And if it does, it's not the fault of the town, it's the fault of the police department or the traffic. Buses should not be allowed to come up. Our streets are narrow. Our roads are narrow. Main Street, there isn't enough parking for buses. There should be a situation where traffic is controlled, major traffic is controlled on the avenue, like Chestnut and so on, and Morris. It's like, to me, it's, I don't want to say it's ridiculous that we go through all this. This has been in the works for years, and it's been in discussion for years. Studies have been done. Let's get the project done so our children and everyone.
I don't want to be rude, but I've asked everybody to be brief.
Okay,
so
I'm
you got
sorry.
one
Okay,
sentence
I'm sorry,
if you
but-
want to surmise.
It's going to happen. Thank you.
Then I'll come to you. I should have done this.
I'm Paul Thompson. I live on Dockside. I'm a neighbour of Ed's, almost, just round the corner. You're going to be a tough act to follow, mate. I enjoyed every minute of that. Maybe just point out sort of a few things in response to what you said, Andy, about 600,000 people suddenly overwhelming our town. And you compared it with what's happened up the road in Poughkeepsie with the bridge. That bridge is 1.2 miles long. This is a 7.5 mile long trail. So I don't think it's a fair comparison. It's also worth noting that the document itself, 709 pages, is a pretty tough read, I have to say. I haven't read it word for word. I've tended to glance through it. There is a machine-readable version on the Hudson Highlands Fjord Trail. You can search through the document at leisure, picking up keywords as you will. So it's a relatively easy document to navigate using that particular tool. Okay, let me pick up on a few things. I'm not an expert birder like Pete. I couldn't hope to compare with you, Pete. I have a Merlin bird app on my phone, and I run a lot in Hubbard Lodge and all the trails around the village and the town. And I cover many thousands I cover about 2,500 to 3,000 miles on the dirt roads in this area every year, and have done for the last 4 years since I moved here with my wife. You know, I get it, there's going to be some concerns, some bumps on the road here, but as far as I'm concerned, we're putting the future of our community, this great recreational asset, in the hands of an organisation that I really truly believe will do a good job for us. And if not, hey, you know, we're going to kind of hold their feet to the fire and make sure that they do. Somebody else pointed out, what about the kids? The problem with the DGIS, while it's a fabulous document and I think is fairly presented, there's one constituent that we're not going to hear from, and they are the kids. These guys are going to inherit the legacy, what we leave behind. I would impress on all people who have children to go home and say, what do you think about this trail? And to be informed by their views, not telling them what they should think about the trail. As it happens, I don't have kids, so that job's pretty easy for me. In terms of like Dockside, all the concerns about, we're going to suddenly get overwhelmed with a lot of traffic and a lot of people. As Ed says, there are a lot of issues with wayfaring. It is a difficult place to navigate, even at the moment, to find your way to Fair Street and beyond. Wayfaring can sort that. A robust parking policy can also help eliminate the risk of us getting overwhelmed with cars. Word will soon get out, there's nowhere to park. Don't come unless you can get a train ticket and get off at Cold Spring Station. There's a whole lot of stuff that I've got here, but I'm going to kind of just pick on a few
Can I
of
ask you
them.
to sort of wind it up in the next minute,
Okay,
please?
will do. Various people have pointed out about the view shed running across Fair Street. I don't think it's necessary that the trail sits above the railway tracks. I get it, the river is rising. But I've seen boardwalks with a below track level in the area, for example, in Peekskill. I think they can be below track level and with mesh fencing to keep the debris out. Last but not least, Pete, sorry to pick on you again, you talked about ruining a village with a roundabout, or a traffic circle, I guess you call them here. You know, I've come from a village in northern England which is over 1,000 years old. The centrepiece is a roundabout. It has not ruined the village, and there are villages across Europe with roundabouts. And people navigate them, they get used to them. They're a very good and efficient way of managing traffic and making them safe. So a place can be quaint and have a roundabout, and quainter them with an intersection with lights. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
If you were.
Thank you, Conservation Board. It's really a crucial moment at this point with this project. I just have a question about process. Is it my understanding that you guys have already determined what your concerns are as expressed tonight? Did you collectively determine that, or is there, and then I heard something about a public hearing in March. I'm not following this as it relates to the various
I don't believe there's another
boards.
public hearing at this point. Within the CEQA process, they're basically looking for comments from all
So it's not
involved.
your public hearing?
No.
Okay.
They're looking for comments from involved agencies, which the Conservation Board and particularly the town of Philipstown, and I believe both villages consider themselves involved agencies. And it seems like all three are very, very uncomfortable with the southern section of the trail.
But collectively, as a board, the boards have voted on this and collectively written this comment and submitted it.
The conservation was tasked as the agency for the town to go through this.
And you've already determined what your comments are. I mean, I'm sorry.
They're still in the process.
Okay, that's what I heard tonight was.
The town of Philipstown
were the concerns, and I just assumed that.
Meaning the town board is very concerned with the impacts.
Certainly, I think everybody is, and
I
that's.
don't think we believe that they are mitigatable.
So everyone on this board agrees with that.
I am speaking, I'm not speaking for the board, I'm speaking for my conversations
That's what
with
I
the
didn't
town
understand.
supervisor.
I didn't understand.
Yeah,
I assume that this entire board was being represented by you, and you've already collectively decided and voted on what your concerns are. That's all. I'm just trying to understand where you're at as a board with this, because my perception tonight was that, and I don't know where you are in the process. I apologize. I have a lot to follow and do, in my own job. So I'm here tonight, new to where you guys are at in the process. And I'm leaving here thinking that you guys all discuss this and collectively agree specifically and have voted and determined what your concerns are. So
There would be no vote on this. So
Okay.
basically, about half of us were a key committee going through this material, and now the rest of the members
Well,
are
I
looking
do
at-
appreciate the generosity and the time and the openness you're giving, yourselves to do this in the public, because as I said, it's a crucial time. And I'll just try to paraphrase this. I have to read, because as always, I get nervous. But I'm here representing the community's interests. I am here as an elected official. Whenever I speak or write, I am always an elected official, never claiming that, I'm speaking for myself, because I'm voted to represent the people of Philipstown and part of Putnam Valley. So I'm very grateful to be given this opportunity and the process that you've been so open in letting people speak about it. And I disagree with that gentleman that we are the be-all and end-all in towns and villages, because our scenic beauty, along with these stretches of state-owned land, give us many challenges, and one is over-tourism, right? So they're here. This is why for 17 years, I think, or more, I've been at the table talking about this project, and it's been very challenging, and we started this conversation to solve this problem. And the state owns this land, and way back then, 17 years ago, up until maybe 2015, it wasn't always easy with the state. We were at odds with the state. They owned all this land. We as elected officials were like, oh my God, what are you doing? You have to support us in this. We have this land, and our emergency response systems are up on the mountain, all day, every weekend. And we know over time that data has decreased with the improvements we've made to Breakneck, and with the Washburn lot, and with the safety that we've put in place. So I think it's not going to change. I think they're going to keep coming whether we do this or not. And we're not, the development is going to continue to encroach on us unless the state is going to maybe put the land up for sale, and then we become an ugly town and nobody wants to come here. I don't imagine that's going to happen. So speaking from a personal place, there's Dockside, which I think will be a very important environmentally sensitive area for the Conservation Board to consider. I spent many years there during its heyday, probably much of my whole life. It's a unique thing for someone like me to be able to live in a town, work in a place like Dockside, where I booked live music bands 3 nights a week with dancing and rock and roll. I bartended in 3 of the 3 bars there. I probably worked hundreds of weddings, including some people in this room. So Dockside was a vibrant, really exciting place. And it's beautiful now, and it hopefully will remain beautiful with the care that New York State Parks and the town and all of us that are concerned. So it's at this 7-mile trail that I see value in continuing this opportunity that we do have in this town through access and a way out. What I see when I still work in the village of Cold Spring is people getting off the train or driving their cars and nobody has a place to go. There's nowhere to park. People are just congested on Main Street doing pirouettes. So what I see through this iconic property is a pathway out, and a pathway for all, especially for those who live here, especially for those who are clogging up Main Street. You know, what better way to maybe get rid of all these tourists that you don't like seeing? Put them out on the river, maybe. I don't know, whatever works. And I'm sure, and I hope, with continued collaboration, that Fjord Trail and New York State Parks is going to consider that Riverkeeper memo and work collaboratively at the table and not be shut out from conversations, as has often happened with people through this process. So there's a history to our region that's built around connection. And for centuries, pathways along this river, pathways that tied the communities together. And I'm sure there was a footpath once connecting Cold Spring to Beacon. But over time, this natural walkway was replaced by infrastructure. First the roadways, then the railways, planes, trains, and automobiles transformed our landscape in many ways and basically cut us off from the very river that defines our identity. I sometimes wonder what the Vanderbilts and the Fjords would, the Vanderbilts and the Fords would say if they were here today. I would say to them, why didn't you leave a pedestrian access along the riverfront when you created your legacy of railroads and roads? Why didn't you ensure that the public could walk along the shore like they had done for centuries before? What we need today are not just roads, but places where people can walk off the road, not in the road. For over a century and a half, the railroad has essentially cut off the community from fully experiencing the Hudson shoreline. This project is a chance to remedy that historic divide. It also provides the opportunity to address critical safety concerns while creating partnerships with DOT and the MTA to upgrade outdated rail and road infrastructure, partnerships with public-private partnerships with outside agencies. This is how things get done. Lord knows we can't afford to do them alone with our tax dollars. A good public benefit project addresses a clear problem, but also a great project takes on multiple challenges. Challenges that, when tackled thoughtfully, can lead to something better and safer. This shoreline trail will do just that. It's an investment in the future of our community, and I'm hopeful that through this project that New York State Parks and the DOT will continue to collaborate on thoughtful traffic mitigation strategies with the village leadership and with the town leadership and Fjord, especially in critical areas like the intersection of 9D and 301. The reality is that time brings change and growth. This kind of infrastructure will be necessary eventually, whether we act now or later. Missing this opportunity to improve public safety and enhance public access would be a mistake. Failing to take this chance to address these long-standing safety issues could become a costly, unforgivable oversight. This project is an investment in the future of our community, in the safety of our residents, and in the long-term health of our shared environment. I urge you to consider it, to not come out in public and state what your unofficial concerns are before you meet collectively as a board and decide to put that forward in a collective way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Nancy, I got one question. Over there in the county, that's where you're at. Is there any funds available that'll help us out later on to maintain this stuff and to cover the cost of the litter removal, the policing, and all that kind of stuff?
I believe
Is there any monies available for that?
there's no money available for, there's no money available now for it. And I believe you understand from the county executive's letter to the town that he has his concerns. I think he's putting together a panel from the Bureau of Emergency Services to examine this. The money that's available for tourism comes from most of it comes from New York State and I Love New York program. And guess what that's for? It's for promotion. It's for promotion outside of the county. That money can't be used for anything other than promotion. So, and the other money that the county puts into tourism is basically pays the salary of a tourism director that promotes tourism.
So there'll be no money coming back for maintenance and all that kind of stuff, because that's going to end up costing a lot of money.
It can be proposed. I'm sure it can be proposed in any budget forthcoming. I'd be happy to put that forward.
Okay, we're going off topic now. I do want to wrap this up shortly, so I'm going to be very strict now. You have 2 minutes, and that's it. The gentleman in the gray shirt. Also, if anybody is working for the Fjord Trail, this is not the time to discuss it with us.
I don't work for the Fjord Trail. My name's John Erickson. I live at 32 West Street. As a fellow birder, I just want to express my support for everything Pete said. The Cerulean Warbler is a striking blue and white warbler. It has a beautiful trilling sound. It is a high point of every spring to hear it and to see it. A lot of attention's been paid to the Washburn parking lot. Little Stony Point has been a little overlooked, I think. The DGEIS appendices have some information about the construction plans for Little Stony Point. It includes a 50-foot wide corridor through the northern section of tree clearing, bringing trucks in over the current pedestrian bridge north and south for the shoreline boardwalk. Little Stony Point is 17 acres. It has single-track trails, carriage-style trails currently. In the long term, the DGIS proposes widening these paths to up 8, 10, 12, 25 feet wide, I believe is the widest they propose. And a couple other just really quick points I wanted to mention. The DGEIS doesn't talk about long-term maintenance of the boardwalk, repairing pilings, assessing pilings, we just have no idea. We do know that the pilings will be subject to weathering from ice flows, thawing, freezing cycles. I'd like to see more information presented by HHFT about their plans for assessing and maintaining and repairing the pilings in the long term, because obviously this would be around for time immemorial if built. And the last point is just that the last July, HHFT published an RFP for parking lot and shuttle bus operators. That document is not included in the DGEIS, but it includes really relevant information about HHFT's plans for charging for parking, the frequency with which they plan to run shuttle buses, the routes of shuttle buses, phased parking lot, the phasing in of parking lots. All of that is really relevant for determining where people will go, like what their financial incentive will be about where they decide to park, if they pay for parking at an HHFT lot or seek out parking in the village. Again, that document is not in the DGEIS, but it is incredibly relevant. And if you could seek it out from HHFT, I'd ask you to just consider it in relation to your broader work on the DGEIS. Thanks.
Good evening, everybody. How are you? Very quick comment, and I'm going to reserve any public comment on the Fjord Trail and this aspect of it until our board workshop in a few weeks. I just wanted to mention that and follow up on some process. Jason Angel, I am on the town board and liaison to the conservation board. Nancy asked some good questions about the process, so I just wanted to comment on those. I think right now the process is that Supervisor Van Tassel on the town board asked the conservation board to review the DGEIS and express their point of view to the town board. At the same time, we hired Tim Miller Associates, who has a deep background in SECRA and land use planning analysis, to review the DGEIS. They are putting together a memo that will go to the town board. We are having a public workshop on February 19th, at which point Tim Miller Associates' memo will be presented to the town board and we'll be able to ask questions. At that same workshop, I'm hoping we'll get the conservation board's point of view as well. The point of that is the town board will then review that material, ask questions, and pass a resolution to submit our letter to as part of the public hearing process, which we all know closes on March 4th. So town is a involved agency, and that will be the process from our point of view to put it forward. The last thing I'll say is that I know I very much, I've been sitting in the Conservation Board meetings for the past 4 years. I admire all of the work that you all do and the expertise you bring to our community, and you've really taken on quite a tall task with this one, so I think it's appreciated. And I would just follow up, I think the last speaker, I would commend the last speaker for being so detailed and specific related to the DGEIS. And so I would just say that what would be useful as the Conservation Board puts forward their point of view is to really drill down past generalized opinion, past a statement like the proposed mitigations aren't adequate, but really to get into the whys they aren't from your point of view. And that is a bit difficult, but that is what would be really useful, to go beyond generalized opinion into kind of tied specificity to the DGEIS. I look forward to reviewing that. Thanks for all the work you do.
Shouldn't take too long. I prepared. My name is Kathleen McLean. I live at 2066 Route 9D, which is basically right where Fair Street and 9D meet. So I'll read my prepared statement. The Fjord Trail represents a unique opportunity to address long-standing concerns about tourism safety and park use in our area. My family and I own a house on the north end of the village, directly in line with the Fjord Trail. Our children attend Haldane, and we have lived there for more than 10 years. I can't say how many times I've watched from my porch, like very dangerous, almost happenings. Like many, we moved from Manhattan to raise a family and chose Cold Spring without considering any other options. How did I know the secrets of Cold Spring? I used to hike here for years and years, long before Instagram and before the other social media drivers that locals blame for the tourism. Word of mouth brought us here. Cold Spring has never been a secret. New York State Parks has long promoted it as a destination for hiking and outdoor use. The Fjord Trail concept is a culmination of a decades-long uptrend in tourism in our area. It is obvious that the beauty of our area, coupled with the proximity to New York City and the convenience of the reliable commuter train, has drawn the attention of many, as it did my own family. This is a good thing. We enjoy a class of tourists who largely rely on public transport. They hike, they bike, they shop, and then they're gone by sunset, leaving a ton of cash behind, hopefully. To find fault with any of this is irrational. A combination of train access, nearby trailheads, and a string of lovely towns along its reach is unprecedented for an American park. This genie is not going back in the bottle. Ignoring or obstructing efforts to manage the situation will appropriately backfire. The current unimproved situation leaves Cold Spring as a bottleneck with inadequate facilities. It forces people through a single train station, through quiet village streets, across yards, and down a shoulderless highway to access trailheads, even if they would prefer to avoid it. It is not if, but when someone will be killed on that highway, and I've actually spoken to people who have told me that people have been killed in that actual location.
Please sum it up.
Yep, this is my last part. Linear parks are well proven and highly successful park concept. Cold Spring Village is but one stop that will become numerous access points, train stations, and other infrastructure improvements aimed at spreading out the impact of tourism over many miles. World-class experts in park architecture and design have spent years conceiving this. New York State has an incredible track record for park management and planning. We have parks in the state larger than neighboring states and most national parks. Let's trust the experts and the process. I unequivocally support the Fjord Trail.
Thank you. All right, it is getting late, so I'm cutting anybody off after 2 minutes. Do your best at public speaking.
My name is Travis Biro. This is Lila. We just wanted to kind of come up here and reiterate a lot of the things we're hearing said here today. I get the privilege of kind of interacting with our community in a lot of different ways. I work at the rec department to facilitate a lot of the sports programs. I run our elections and our school board votes, the Manitou School Lunch Guild. And in all those capacities, I interact with parents and families and people that are in full support of this trail. We see it as an absolute necessity to providing a safe place for our kids to grow up in this area. And yeah, I would just like to say that in all those conversations, in every room I'm in, it's the same breakdown. It's about an 80% support, 20% very well-informed, concerned citizens. But I do believe in the ability to mitigate all the issues brought up in the DGIS. I can't imagine that we've come across an engineering marvel here that is beyond human capacity. And I have the utmost faith in the organizations that are putting this plan together that it's going to support not only the people coming to visit, but the locals here. And that's why I think it's important that this trail extend the full length of its intended purpose, because a trail that starts anywhere but dockside leaves out the community that is closest to it. And so for the next generation of folks who also want to voice their support, I think someone asked, what do the kids want? Go ask the kids. I would bet they have even higher percentage of support for this than their parents. They see firsthand that there is no safe place to ride their bike. These sidewalks are a mess. If you've pushed a stroller in this town, you know it's a disaster. And something that is designed from the get-go as accessible and is going to bring more access to this beautiful part of our town, I think is spectacular. So that's I'd like to say thanks.
Thank you. In the blue.
Kudos to the river keeper for having shown that they are stakeholders in this whole adventure. We're only 30% through the design phase. So I came tonight with some highlights of conservation issues like habitats. Max, you probably would speak to this. Pilings have been used for years as erosion. No, when you go into chamber and talk.
Okay,
I'm not
let's
allowed to
not,
speak
no,
to people?
stop. You have
Okay,
2 minutes.
has it been
I
done?
want you to be quick.
Okay, so the other thing I want to bring up is that maybe there's a fisherman here, but I don't know, but I did look into it. And with global warming, we know that the waters are heating up. And what I found is that the sturgeons like cooler water. So that boardwalk is going to provide shade. And we need shading for 65 to 72 degree water for the sturgeons to spawn. And that's what I had to add tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
I've never heard that argument before.
Hi, thank you again for letting us speak. I first want to just say that I had the opportunity to see an eagle in a tree right behind our house 2 days ago. I've never seen that before, bald eagle. and it was looking towards the river. And from his perspective, or her perspective, I imagine 18 months spread over 6 years of barges and pilings being drilled into that river. And what is that going to do? Is that eagle going to come back? Maybe not in my lifetime. I want to talk about multiple routes through Cold Spring. We don't have to have a trail. We have many routes to get through Cold Spring, and there are even more. As long as you don't call it a trail and have to abide by 10 feet, you can go on any one of these routes through the village. And yet they've all been systematically knocked out because they're not 10 feet wide. We don't need 10-foot wide one thing. And it's not just what they build, it's what they promote. We just heard from Nancy that they have a promotional budget. So guess what? It's not just going to be say, okay, we're building it, maybe they'll come. It's going to be like, we're getting them there. So next thing. I was looking at the resiliency report for the Metro North. What happens is in 2050, a lot more of the trail is going to be, or a lot more of the railroad tracks are going to be underwater. This thing's going to be built. It's going to be open in 2031. 2033 is when they're going to start taking data on visitation. That's 17 years from 2050. So what's the plan when the pilings are now going underwater from time to time? Are they going to build it higher? So there's no plan. And as far as any kind of mitigation, what we need is mitigation for what's here already. Orca was called in. Orca is usually called into a project to mitigate the problem afterwards. Orca was called in to mitigate before. Why? Because they know there's going to be a problem. And they've already taken the mitigation we could be using for the problems we already have, and they're taking it for their trail. I think it's a matter of David versus Goliath, and this big thing is trying to overpower us all. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. Well, you.
I'm from the Glenham area of Dutchess County, just outside of Beacon. And I just want to tell you, I've been living up here for over 40 years. And if you took the train from Beacon, that whole area of Long Dock, it used to be a wasteland. So since this development of Long Dock and Deddings Point, it's become a jewel of the community. And this is going to be extension of that. I went through a walkthrough for the Fjord Trail from where Beacon, where it starts from the train station. And to see this as an extension is just, I think it's just going to be an enhancement for the community. I want to keep it as brief. Basically, that's my main point. The other thing about the roundabouts, they built quite a few up in Dutchess County, and they've only improved the traffic. A lot of people were very skeptical about it, but it's turned out to be a godsend. So I want to keep it brief, but thank you.
All right, it's past 9 o'clock, so I think we've had a lot of great public comment. I thank everybody for coming in. The instructions to the board are, let's look and decide how we're going to finalize the beginning of our communication to the town board, and then look at specific details as best as we can of concerns, particularly what we feel cannot be mitigated. Okay. I don't think we have any unfinished business.
Stormwater. Yeah, you guys want to stay for the stormwater update?
Do you have a stormwater update? No, I didn't think so. With that, I would like have a motion to close the meeting.
I make that motion.
No, Lou made the motion. You're going to second it?
I'll second it.
All in favor? Aye.